The moment Sarah Mitchell saw the old woman collapse on the subway platform, time seemed to fragment into 1,000 sharp pieces. Everyone else kept walking, their eyes fixed on phones, on destinations, on anything but the frail body crumpled against the cold tile like a discarded coat. Sarah's coffee slipped from her hand, the cup exploding in a spray of caramel macchiato. But she was already running, her heels clicking in urgent rhythm against the platform floor. She didn't think. She just moved. Because that's what her mother would have done. That's what she should have done 3 years ago when it mattered most. The woman's skin felt papery beneath, Sarah's trembling fingers as she checked for a pulse. Alive. Thank God. Alive. Someone call 911! Sarah's voice cracked through the indifferent crowd. And finally, people began to stop. A teenager pulled out his phone. A businessman loosened his tie and knelt beside her. The wall between strangers began to crumble, brick by brick, and Sarah realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face for a woman she'd never met. For a moment, that was giving her a second chance at something she'd lost forever. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but Sarah couldn't let go of the woman's hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're not alone." The woman's eyes fluttered open, cloudy and confused, and her lips formed a single word that Sarah would never forget. Her. At the hospital, Sarah should have left. She had a presentation at 9, a career-defining moment she'd prepared for weeks. Her boss had made it clear that nothing, short of a personal emergency, would excuse an absence. But as she sat in the sterile waiting room, watching doctors rush past and families clutch each other in desperate embraces, Sarah realized she was exactly where she needed to be. She texted her resignation. Not a request for time off, a resignation. Because some moments demand we choose who we want to be, and Sarah was tired of being someone who chose wrong. The woman's name was Eleanor Vance, and she had no emergency contacts listed. No family, no friends who came looking. Just a small apartment in Queens and a life that seemed to have contracted to the size of a single room. When Eleanor was finally stable, moved to a regular room with pale yellow walls and a window overlooking the parking lot, Sarah visited. She brought flowers from the bodega downstairs, cheap carnations that seemed pathetic in their plastic wrapping. But Eleanor's face transformed when she saw them. "You stayed," Eleanor whispered, her voice dry as autumn leaves. "Of course I stayed," Sarah said, though she couldn't explain why. "You said her. Who did you mean?" The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Sarah hadn't noticed. She sat in the corner of the hospital waiting room, her hands wrapped around the paper cup, like it was the only solid thing left in a world that had suddenly turned to water. Through the window, dawn was breaking over downtown Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost offensive in their beauty. Her mother was dying 3 floors above her, and the world had the audacity to be beautiful. Sarah had always thought she'd have more time. Isn't that what everyone thinks? More time for the conversations that mattered. More time to say the things that needed saying. More time to simply sit together in comfortable silence. But cancer doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. At 42, Sarah was about to become an orphan, and the weight of that word pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. She'd been at the hospital for 3 days straight, leaving only to shower and change clothes at her apartment downtown. Her boss had stopped calling. Her friends had stopped texting, except for the occasional "thinking of you" message that she couldn't bring herself to answer. In this fluorescent-lit limbo, time moved differently. Minutes stretched into hours, hours compressed into moments. She existed in a strange space between before and after, unable to move forward, unable to go back. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Sarah looked up, pulled from her thoughts by a gentle voice. A woman stood beside her, maybe in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that crinkled at the corners. She wore a volunteer badge that read Barbara and carried a small basket of muffins. "No, please," Sarah managed, moving her purse. Barbara settled into the chair with a small sigh. "Long night?" 3 long days, actually. Sarah's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "Rough from disuse." "I'm sorry." Barbara's words were simple, but something in the way she said them made Sarah's eyes burn with unshed tears. "Is it family?" "My mom?" Sarah swallowed hard. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say it's just a matter of time now. Barbara reached over and placed her weathered hand on top of Sarah's. The gesture was so unexpectedly kind that Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. A single tear escaped, then another, and suddenly she was crying, in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry since the diagnosis. Barbara didn't speak. She just sat there, her hand steady and warm, letting Sarah fall apart. When the storm finally passed, Barbara pulled a tissue from her pocket and handed it over. "I lost my husband here 5 years ago," she said quietly. "Lung cancer. I thought I'd never set foot in this hospital again. But here I am every Tuesday and Thursday, bringing muffins to people in waiting rooms." Barbara sat in the front row, and afterward, she helped Sarah organize the reception. They worked together in comfortable silence, setting out food, making coffee, greeting guests. At one point, Sarah found herself standing next to a young woman she didn't recognize. "I'm sorry for your loss," the woman said. "Your mother was special. Did you know her?" Sarah asked. "Not really, but 5 years ago I was in a really dark place. Depressed, broke, convinced the world would be better without me. I went to her bookstore looking for something, though I didn't know what. She spent 3 hours with me, recommending books, making tea, just listening. She gave me her personal phone number and made me promise to call if I needed to talk. I thought it was strange at the time, but I kept that number. Called it once, in the middle of the night when things got really bad." She answered. "Stayed on the phone with me until dawn." The woman's eyes were bright with tears. "She saved my life. I just wanted you to know that." Sarah watched her walk away, and something clicked into place. This was what her mother had meant. This was the ripple effect of kindness, spreading outward in ways you never see, touching lives in moments you'll never know about. 6 months later, Sarah made a decision. She kept her mother's bookstore open, but she added something new. Every Thursday afternoon, she hosted a gathering for anyone who needed it. People came to talk, to read, to simply sit in companionship. Barbara helped her, bringing her famous muffins. Others joined them, people who'd been helped and wanted to help in turn. They called it her because that's what Sarah's mother had always been to so many people. Not a name, not a title, just her. The woman who'd been there. The woman who'd cared. The woman who'd proved that one person's kindness could change the world, one small act at a time. And on difficult days, when Sarah felt the weight of her mother's absence like a physical ache, she thought about Barbara's hand on hers in that waiting room. She thought about her mother's last words. She thought about the young woman whose life had been saved by 3 hours of attention and a phone number scrawled on a bookmark. She thought about all the ways love survives, rippling outward like light, touching people who will touch others, creating an endless chain of kindness that death cannot break. And she understood finally that her mother had never really left at all. She lived on in every act of generosity, in every moment of compassion, in every stranger who chose to be kind when kindness wasn't required. She lived on in the story they were all writing together, one small kindness at a time. It took 3 months to organize. Sarah worked with galleries, with printers, with framers. She learned about f-stops and composition, about the difference between looking and seeing. She used her savings, called in favors, begged and charmed, and refused to take no for an answer. And Eleanor slowly, carefully came back to life. She told stories to journalists. She helped curate the collection. She left her apartment for the first time in months, years really, and remembered what it felt like to have purpose. The exhibition opened on a Tuesday evening in a small gallery in Chelsea. The room filled with people, with strangers who'd seen the flyers, with Margaret's old friends who'd lost touch with Eleanor after the funeral, with art lovers and photography, students and people who just wandered in from the street and found themselves transfixed by a dead woman's vision of beauty in the everyday. Sarah stood beside Eleanor as people moved through the space, gasping at a photograph of subway. Commuters, where each face told a different story of exhaustion and hope, pausing before an image of an old woman feeding pigeons in Central Park, the birds frozen mid-flight like angels descending. "She would have been overwhelmed by this," Eleanor whispered, gripping Sarah's arm. "She never believed her work was good enough." "She saw people," Sarah said softly. "Really saw them. That's her gift." She saw the humanity in everyone. An older man approached them, his eyes red-rimmed. "Excuse me, are you Margaret's mother?" When Eleanor nodded, he continued. "That photograph over there, the one of the homeless veteran with the dog, that's my brother. Margaret took that picture 6 months before he died. She gave him a copy, and it was the only thing he kept with him. He told me it made him feel seen. Like he mattered." His voice broke. "I just wanted you to know that your daughter's work saved him in a way. Made his last months bearable because someone had seen his humanity." Eleanor collapsed into Sarah's arms, sobbing. And Sarah held her while strangers became witnesses to grief and grace intertwined. The exhibition was a success, but more than that, it was a testament. A reminder that we all carry gifts meant to be shared, that isolation is a choice we don't have to make, that it's never too late to say yes to connection. 2 years later, Sarah still lives in Queens, in an apartment 3 blocks from Eleanor's. She works as a curator now, specializing in showcasing artists who've been overlooked or forgotten. She visits Eleanor every Sunday for tea and conversation. They've become each other's family, chosen and cherished. Sometimes Sarah thinks about that moment on the subway platform. How easy it would have been to keep walking like everyone else, to let someone else take responsibility, to stay safe behind the wall of indifference that protects us from the overwhelming need all around us. She thinks about the life she would have continued living, successful and lonely, achieving everything except what mattered. And she thinks about the word Eleanor spoke that first day. Her. Sarah had assumed Eleanor meant Margaret. But now she wonders if that single word was bigger than one person, if it was a recognition of something. Universal, her. Every woman who's been unseen. Every person who's collapsed under the weight of loneliness and grief. Every daughter and mother and stranger who needs someone to stop walking and kneel down and say, "I see you. You're not alone." In the end, Sarah's mother had been right about everything that mattered. Kindness is never wasted. Love is never too late. And the most important decision we make, again and again, is whether we'll stop or keep walking when someone falls. Whether we'll choose connection over convenience, humanity over advancement, love over fear. Sarah chose. And in choosing, she saved 2 lives that day on the subway platform. Eleanor's and her own. Because that's how kindness works. That's how humanity survives. One moment of courage. One person saying yes when it would be easier to say no. One stranger becoming family. Because someone decided that loneliness ends when we decide it ends, when we reach out our hands and refuse to let go. Her, all of us, together, that's the story. That's always been the story.